Welcome to another episode of the Wild Strength podcast. Today, my guest is Draya Grangroth, and her walk up song is The Rut by Turnpike Troubadours. I think that's such a fitting song, too.
I love it. It gets me fired up every time for hunting season. It's like my hype song.
Yeah, people laugh at me because I will listen to that kind of music working out, like driving to
hmm
the gym, and people just think I'm crazy for it, but it does it for me, and that's all that matters.
Exactly. The words in that song too. They just like, yeah, let's do these squats so we can pack out these elk.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. Well, cool. Like I said, this is Drea. I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll get into things.
Thanks for having me, Whit. Super excited to chat, see where the conversation goes today. So my name is Draya. I'm a small business owner, hunting guide, photographer, creative. I'm an author. I published a book couple years ago. What's Her Wild and Untold Story talks all about wild places and the healing powers of wild places, and a lot about my story growing up, facing some trauma and using the wild places to heal from that and to find myself. And that's sort of how I have found myself now in this industry, being a creative. It's kind of funny because, like, when I was a kid, I loved running around with the camera. I loved taking my brothers and like my friends hunting. I thought it was so cool
Mm-hmm.
to take other people hunting and to like see their expressions and to just show them that space. And now fast forward to, 34 years later, this is like what I'm pursuing and this is what fills up my cup and it's what I want to do. It's what I want to continue sharing with other people. So love being able to come on some of these platforms like this to be able to share wild places with others. There's so many ways we can do that outside of my very short season of guiding, right? Like guiding only lasts for a few months. So being able to come on and chat is always fun, and it's a great way to inspire, to educate, to talk about hunting, talk about fitness, talk about whatever comes up. So looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah. I I always end my episodes asking like what does wild strength mean to you? And I'll do the same, but just after I think I first Guy, the Western Contours podcast was the first
Yeah.
time I had ever heard of you, and I listened to that episode and I was just like blown away by your story. And where I really related was, and kind of where wild strength comes from, is using the wild, using the outdoors for healing, and really just like finding myself. Like, I'm from Texas, and there's things to do outside, right? But nothing compared to like being in the mountains or being in a forest or in the woods or whatever. And so when I moved out to Colorado the first time, and it was like 2018, I would spend so much time in the mountains and just realize that like I'm becoming a different version of myself, a better version of myself, a more like empowered version of myself. And for the longest time, I couldn't put words to it. So then, like, listening to that conversation you had with Guy, and for anyone who's listening, check out the Western Contours podcast. And Drea had a really good conversation on there too. But yeah, what was it? I guess maybe speak a little bit to like the book that you wrote and the story that you tell in your book, What's Your Wild? And then kind of how the outdoors has been that for you.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. So without getting into it too deep, so I the wild is where I found myself, right? So when I was a little girl, um, I suffered some trauma and never felt safe in the home. And so I always loved being outside, and I was living in this constant fight, flight, freeze mode. And anytime I felt like an overwhelming emotional coming up, I didn't know how to regulate those emotions. And so I would literally just like run away and go into the woods behind the house. And
Mhm.
I have an obsession with ferns because that's where I would go. I would go, these ferns were about 4 feet tall, and I would just sit among them and I'm talking like, I'm 13, 12 years old, and I'm sitting there and I feel completely safe. I feel super grounded. A lot of times the deer would come by and I would just watch them. A dragonfly would always come by and visit me and fly off. And soon I felt, regulated. I felt safe. I felt grounded. And I would sit there for maybe 15 minutes, sometimes a couple hours, and then I would go back home, and could, start to like regulate myself a little bit. So I've had this very deep connection with wild places for a really long time. It's essentially what got me through my childhood. And then as I moved to Colorado and I started diving into seasonal work, and kind of went through a really rough patch. I feel like we all have those. People refer to it as their college years, but I wasn't going to college. I was using all the wrong vices to like make me feel good, and that brought me to rock bottom, where I was like, wow, you have a lot of work to do. You need to stop drinking so much. You've got to stop staying up late. You got to get back in the gym, get back on the mountain. I like kind of stopped hiking, and like my connection with wild places was still there because I was a whitewater raft guide at that time. So I was outside all the time, but I sort of lost myself in that chaos of those distractions of the wrong vices. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing my own thing. And I really learned a lot in the late 20s portions of my life where I dove into, most importantly, my healing, right? So starting to see a therapist. She was the one that encouraged me to start writing, and if it wasn't for her, I probably would have never wrote the book. And so that started to help me regulate my emotions. And then I started realizing like I was going to all these really phenomenal wild places, and I kind of dove into the creative part of it. And after a while, the more I told my story, the more people I talked to, the more people confided in me that that also happened to them. And I realized, oh, this isn't just me. I'm not the only one that has trauma. There's a lot of people who have trauma on different levels. And when I talk about it, other people feel safe to talk to me about it. So I felt this need to write a book. And I made several attempts at it. And then finally, on my third attempt, I was living remotely in Colorado off grid for an outfitter I was working for then. And for the winter months, I just sat down and it all just unfolded so effortlessly. It was super liberating experience, very healing, to just go back and relive my life from when I was born to present day. So my book is filled with all sorts of stories of wild places, from being a kid and fishing on the Columbia River and hunting in the woods behind my house all by myself at 12 years old for black-tailed deer, Roosevelt elk. Like, I've never really needed my dad to hold my hand when I was a kid to do those things. I love to hunt and fish with him, and I took every opportunity I could to learn from him and to share that with him. But I also really loved just being by myself out there. And I believe that stemmed from that grounding place that I was searching for and that I tapped into. And so throughout the book to present day, it talks about my guiding career and different struggles and different lessons, a lot of lessons that I have learned from wild places, some very life-changing hunts as well. So like I had a mule deer hunt in Colorado where it was my first solo hunt and I was successful. And I remember looking at this deer being like, I've got to pack this thing off the mountain. I'm all by myself. I've done this my whole life. Like I know how to do it, but I've always had someone with me. But to do that on my own and then to pack it out and to go through that suck fest of packing out the entire deer in one load, that is where like Draya was reborn. And that's where I was like, I want to become a guide. I know what I'm doing. This makes me feel very empowered. And I got this confidence that I had lacked my entire life. And from there on, it's just been phenomenal to tap into that and to be able to share wild places with others really fills up my cup, whether that's through guiding, which is the ultimate favorite, being in the field with somebody, getting them on an elk and seeing their face when they hear a bugle for the first time, or, just getting out and hiking with somebody that doesn't normally get to be in the mountains. And that it always puts it back into perspective for me of how fortunate we are to not only have the wild places, but like have it in my backyard. And, it's always good to have that different perspective. So yeah, my book is essentially my life story. I hope it continues to inspire people. It's been a lot more life changing than I thought it would be. People reach out to me who I don't know, and they confide in me because they feel safe in the space because I was vulnerable, so they were vulnerable. And so I know it's bringing healing. I know it's bringing awareness, not only to how important healing and mental health is, but to how important these wild places are. We can utilize it at any time. And I always say it's the best classroom and it's the best healer. Anytime I'm having a bad day, my favorite way to figure it out is to throw weight in my pack and go do a ruck. And that's why I'm obsessed with rucking. Is because it's always like my therapy session. I get done with it and I'm just like, wow, okay, this all makes sense. I'm good now.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And so many good things to touch on there. One, you mentioned kind of early on how you had said that like you realized you weren't the only one who had experienced something traumatic, and everyone's, I always say everyone's trauma looks different, everyone's childhood upbringing whatever looks different, and what may be like hard or challenging or traumatic to me may not be to someone else, but like what may be hard, challenging, traumatic to them may not be to me. So recognizing that that looks different for everyone. And my therapist had kind of said something similar to me when I think I was just feeling alone in all the things that I was feeling and going through and things that I had experienced. And like at first, I absolutely hated her for saying this, but she was like, "I hate to break it to you, but like you're not alone. Like there's so many other people that are feeling similar things." That are going through similar things. And I was like, that's not what I want to hear. But like the more times I would just sit with that, I was like, oh, that feels so good to know that I'm not alone
Yeah.
in this. It feels so good to know that like
Mhm.
there's other people going through hard things, and like that thought alone without the outdoors got me through so much.
Right.
But then like you said, being vulnerable and like sharing your story, and I've kind of also always said like people just spill their lives to me and I didn't know why for so long, and it's because, and I'm sure you imagine similar things, like people probably read your book and message you and they're like, hey, you know what, this is a safe place for me to just let it all out, because you've done the same, like you've let it all out for people to publicly read and see and know about those things, and that creates such a place, an important place, I feel like, because so many people don't want to talk about things that they're going through.
Mhm.
So that creates like a really, in my mind, I used to hate it. Like I said, people would come to me and I'm like, oh my God, I have to take on like your stuff too. I can't handle it. But now it's like, wow, I'm so glad that like, yeah, I gave you that space and that you were able to talk about that. And I hope, if nothing else, that like you just feel better about talking about it. So I relate to that too. And I really agree kind of with that, is like, you know, we're not alone in the things that we're going through. But then you had kind of mentioned how the outdoors, you would go out by yourself. And I'm curious, you said you mentioned like your first solo hunt was really when you were like, okay, I'm witnessing a different me. I'm experiencing a different me,
Right.
and like I really feel like things are changing. What like encouraged you to go out on that solo hunt? And like what, why'd you want to do it by yourself versus with someone else?
Right. So, like I said, growing up, I hunted a ton by myself behind the house, but it was like I felt safe because
Mm-hmm.
it's not these vast mountains of Montana or the big mountains of Colorado. It was just the rainforest behind the house. So, I already had that connection of being out there alone and being able to provide, like the elk and the deer that I killed were just right behind our house, like on the property, just kind of where the public land starts. And then going through that journey of starting to, like, my self-discovery journey, I call it, learning like, who am I? Like, when I started my healing, I'm like, I have no idea who I am. I've been living with this suppressed memory and pretending to be something else for 15 years. And getting out there, and I remember my dad and my sister were hunting just on the other side of the mountain because my sister also had a tag and she was a lot younger, and so my dad was like, well, we're going to take her out. But I just had this need, like it was something inside me that I needed to prove to myself that I was worthy and that I was capable and that I could do it. And for so many years I was listening to this voice of that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't capable, that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't smart enough, I wasn't strong enough, all these things. And so for me, it was super important of like, I want to get out and I want to prove to myself that I'm capable of this because I know I am, but unless if I do it, like if I don't do it, I'm not going to reach that point. And so getting out there and actually doing it and accomplishing it was huge for me. It was, like I said, it was a huge confidence boost. Um, and it sort of just set things into motion from there. And I really fell in love with solo hunting in the bigger mountains, right? And kind of
Mm-hmm.
when you're by yourself, there's everything's on you. Every decision that you make in the field is on you. You can't blame it on somebody else. There's a lot of time to think. There's nobody to talk to, and so great opportunities for me to look inward and to journal and to reflect. And I love that time alone because it really offers me that space to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And I think I do a lot of solo hunting, and at first it wasn't by choice. My intent was never, I want to go out and like prove something to myself. I will say now, like, kind of sounds like I maybe had like a similar thought process. But at first, like when I had moved out to Colorado, I didn't really know anyone who hunted. It was like my first season. I hunted 2 seasons in Texas, moved out to Colorado. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to hunt by myself because I don't really know anyone who can go with me. And fortunately, before that first season, I met a couple of people and I got to go hunting with them. But I also did some solo hunting that season too. And it was like, I remember the first time, and I'm curious if you experienced anything like this. I had pulled up. It was super dark outside, like way before first light. And I go to get out of my car and I started crying. And because I was scared, I was so scared to get out by myself in the dark in a wild place. And like, who knows what could happen. I had never really been to this place before either. It was kind of a new spot, a new area that I was going to. And like, what happens if I fall? What happens if something happens? I have no service here. And I stepped out, I started crying, I got right back into my car and I was like, no, I don't really want to do this. Like, I'm a little scared. And then I was like, there's a couple people who know that I'm doing this today. Like, if I go home and they ask me, how did it go? And I say I was scared, like, I'm going to be so upset with myself. And so I was like, buckle up, like get
I
out
got
there.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, buckle up, get out there and do it. And so I did. I got out of my car and I was scared every freaking step that I took. I wanted to cry every step that I took, but in those steps too, I was so empowered. And like you said, you have that time to yourself. And, and still to this day, like I always encourage people to do things that are like uncomfortable or to do things that challenge you or whatever. And by no means did I do that with that being the goal of it. But I left that day, like I came back to my car at the end of the day and I was like, that was really hard to me, but like I feel like I can conquer the world now, like
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
forced myself to do something that I was so uncomfortable doing. And so now I do a lot more solo hunting. And I think people say like, oh, why do you do that? Like, do you not like being with people, blah blah blah. And I love people. Like, I'm a social butterfly, I'm a people person. I love, kind of like you said you like to share the woods with people, and I love that too. But I think more than anything, it's like I don't love solo hunting. And so that's why I want to do it myself, because I need those places and those times where I can challenge myself. I have to prove to myself that, like, yeah, I'm deserving of certain things because I just feel like I had to work for it. And so I can relate to that a lot. Going out solo. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe for you, you prefer it. I don't prefer solo hunting, but I just feel like it's something that I need to do for myself.
I found it's a balance for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like to guide. This year was a great reflection on that. I learned a lot this
Mm-hmm.
year, like, because I've been guiding full time so much, like in the past years. And this year I was like, I want to make it a goal and a priority to hunt with my friends. I want to guide, and I want to get in some solo hunting, because solo hunting really is that empowerment's there for, especially for me, to be able to go out and to navigate, to step my feet into mountains that I've never been before, a country I've never been before, and to be able to navigate it and not feel overwhelmed. To
Mm-hmm.
know my place, what's north, what's south, where's camp, where have I gone. That's taken a long time to get there too. uh, but there's just a different appreciation being out there alone, and being able to hunt with my friends this year was, it filled up my cup, because it just brings connection. It's just a form of connection that you can't really find anywhere else. Like the camaraderie that happens on the mountain is so beautiful. It's, you're there, you're present, there's no distractions of the phones, you're working towards this goal together. um, and I think it's just the greatest place to connect. So this year was great to be able to have a little bit of all three. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, I like this, I'm going to start doing this every year. And I love, like, driving out to South Dakota to do a solo hunt. Like, I just, there's something about it that just, it fills up my cup. It's like this adventure that I'm going all on my own, and I'm just going to experience it for myself. It's going to be intimate, it's going to be personal. And then heading out to the woods to hunt with your friends, it's always exciting and fun. And then I had somebody ask me this last year, they're like, are you getting excited for guide season? Because it was coming up. And I was like, I've learned to have no expectations when it comes to guide season. Yes, I'm looking forward to what's going to unfold, but
Yeah.
not going to necessarily say I'm excited because I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if I'm going to connect with my client. I don't know what their capabilities are. Um, but I look forward to the challenge. It's a different challenge, right? And sometimes I tell my clients that I want the animal more than you do. Like I become pretty obsessed. Like I'm going to do everything I can to get you this animal. And they see an animal that's 400 yards away and they don't want to go after it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Let's go. We have to go after it. Like you paid a
Hmm.
lot of money to come out here and you don't want to put in the extra effort. Like let's go. But at the end of the day, it's their hunt. They're going to either make that decision or they're not. Um, yeah, so something special to be said about the solo stuff, but also about being able to share it with others.
Yeah, I definitely, and I enjoy being out there. This past season, I had got out with a friend. He had a cow elk rifle tag, and then had a couple other buddies. So we were all camping together, and I had solo hunted all season up until that point, and I was like, yeah, I really the camaraderie that you have out there, whether you feel the tag or not, but like it is that shared challenge of like it's dumping snow, it's 20 degrees outside, we're hiking in, there's no sunlight yet. The wind when we get to the top of the ridge is just gusting, making it even colder. And like we're out here, like I don't want to use the word suffering, but like we're being challenged together, and I think like that kind of builds really good friendships, and then you're also in a place where it's like like I appreciate that. I don't know, sometimes I feel a little crazy in things that I do, so it's like okay, I appreciate that once again there's other people who are doing similar things, who want to do
Yeah,
similar things, for whether their reason is the same or different, and like just that appreciation for people who are like, to me, I almost relate doing those kinds of things, like being in those hard, challenging hunts or situations, as being vulnerable in a different way, right? Because you're being very uncomfortable. You're putting yourself in a very uncomfortable position, getting out of the comfort of your warm and cozy home when the temperature is not going to go above freezing the entire time that you're out. And so I think and I've worked a lot like in a male dominated field, and with men, and so like have kind of a big passion for mental health period, but for like men's mental health because I've worked a lot with military, and so like to see men be vulnerable in that way, because I feel like oftentimes they're able to then like use their words when they're in those challenges and those positions too, and I think is really cool. I'm curious if you've found that like as a guide, when like you probably have a guy who comes in like all tough and they're like, yeah, like I can do this and I'm so good at this. And then they kind of just get shown like, okay, maybe I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was.
hmm funny you say that because I literally just was on the phone yesterday with a
Yeah.
client. We hunted together this last year, and he was able to harvest a bull. Uh, and he was the guy that was calling me. I love Chase; he's awesome. But his story is exactly that. Last summer, leading up to the hunt, he would call me almost every single day because he was so fired up. Drea, I just got this new bow. I've been shooting. Blah blah blah. Great. Oh, Drea, I got this. Blah blah. Oh, Drea, what do you think about this gear? And I was to the point of like kind of getting a little annoyed because I'm like, dude, I don't have time every day to chat with you. Like there's other resources out there, but like also at the same time wanted to like create that relationship with him before the hunt
Mm-hmm.
started. And yeah, I wanted him to be prepared. I wanted him to be ready. And I'm running every day and I'm working out and I'm doing all these things. And I'm like, this hunt's gonna be awesome. This guy sounds like he's fit and strong. And he showed up to camp and I was just like, okay, that's not what I was thinking. Like had some extra weight on him, and at the end of day one, like he was struggling, and we were on day one of 5. And so he was lucky. He harvested elk on the end of day 2. Kind of funny how luck works in that way. But that hunt changed his life. Like
Mm-hmm.
he signed up for Mountain Tough the night of day 1 because he struggled so much on the mountain. And we had only done, I shouldn't say only because everyone has different levels, but we probably did like 6.5, 7 miles, but they were like rolling hills, nothing like too crazy in elevation gain.
Mm-hmm.
But he came from Texas and, he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't used to the altitude and he wasn't used to hiking in all of his gear. Like he would shoot his bow and he would go run, but he wasn't wearing all his gear. He wasn't at altitude. He wasn't doing much for elevation gain. And that mountain humbled him so fast, but he took it with stride. And at the end of day 1, he was complaining so hard. We had a mile left of hiking. And I said, Chase, you're leaving it on the mountain. We're not taking this back with us to camp. It was a tough
Mm.
day. We learned a lot, but we're leaving it on the mountain, and tomorrow's a new opportunity for us to get after it. And he goes, you know what, Drea? Yes, you're right. And he didn't bring any of that negativity back to camp. Literally
Mm.
signed up for Mountain Tough that night. He's still doing Mountain Tough. He's got his own personal trainer. And he called me yesterday, and he's just like, he canceled. This is how much he fell in love with hunting Montana. He canceled a New Zealand hunt, which I don't know why. I would love to hunt New Zealand, but
Yeah.
he felt such a connection, I think, with himself in the Upper
Yeah.
Ruby while we were hunting. Um, his family loves elk meat too. That's another thing. You know, he's like, my wife eats the meat, so that's super important, and she loves to
Mhm.
cook it. And so he is trying to cancel his New Zealand hunt to come and hunt with me again for this next year. He had such an experience out there where he thought he was ready, he thought he was prepared, and he like made it up to be this experience. And then he came out and it was completely different than
Mm.
what he had expected, and completely humbled him. And he had a horrible, like a really hard time getting around because he wasn't ready. But now he's been putting in the work. He's lost a bunch of weight. He's has a really great mindset. Just hearing the tone in his voice was so different. You know, last summer when I was talking to him, he was up here all the time. When I was on the phone with him the other day, he was like, Drea, I feel good. I've been doing this. I just got the Stairmaster. He just like you're chilled out.
Mhm.
Like this is good. And we talk about the mental health. And I talk to him. I'm like, it's not going to be easy to push yourself all the time, but like,
Mm.
proud of you for doing it, buddy. Like we call each other brother and sister. You know, a lot of these clients come out. Some of them you don't connect with. Some of them you
Mm.
really connect with. And with Chase, it's been really cool to see him from up here so excited, comes out, Mountain kicks his ass. He's super humbled, signs up for Mountain Tough. Now he's doing all this work. And I said, hey, I'm holding you accountable. You get drawn this next year. We're going to go hunt. We're going hard. We're going harder than what we did last year because that's what you want, right? Like that's why you're training. And he's all for it. And so we'll see how you see how it unfolds, whether or not he draws the Montana tag or not. Um, but it does change people's lives. Some people come out
Mm.
and they are pretty arrogant, and it humbles them really quick. Like the mountain will always humble you, no matter how many trophy photos you show to the other clients or to me before we start the hunt. You can talk and talk and talk, but the mountain is always going to bring it out of you.
Hmm. I think that's so cool too, because you're saying how, I mean, and maybe this was intentional, maybe this is just how you are, but like you were kind of teaching him a life lesson,
Mm-hmm.
like, and that, you know what, today was not great. Maybe today maybe humbled you a little bit, but like, let's go back to camp with a
Yep.
fresh mind. Let's wake up in the morning, and tomorrow is a new day. We get new opportunities tomorrow. We can learn from yesterday. And I think like you could have very much just been like, yep, today sucked. Like, hopefully tomorrow doesn't suck. Hopefully tomorrow's better. But to kind of like relay that mindset to your client as a guide, I think is huge. And not to say that everyone has to be teaching life lessons, right? But I think that
Yeah.
really goes to show, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, like this is genuinely like a passion of yours. And yeah, maybe you do love the outdoors and you do love hunting and you do love guiding, but it's also so much more to you than that. And to be able to, yeah, it sounds like you completely turned this guy's life around, and I highly doubt that's what he went into that hunt planning for.
Oh, he had no idea that was going to happen, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
his buddy was with, so it was a 2-on-1 hunt, and I was feeling bad for him because Chase was slowing us down, and we were going after elk, and he couldn't keep up. But like he needed to experience that, and you're right. Like being a guide is so much more than getting my clients on the animal. It's giving them the opportunity really to look inward, because that's what the
Mm-hmm.
mountain does. Like the mountain shows you straight up. It's not gonna, you can pretend to be tough all day long, but the mountain's gonna test you in ways that, the stair stepper, you can get off the stair stepper when you get tired. You're 4 miles
Mm-hmm.
into the mountain and it's getting dark and you have to hike out. Well, sorry, we're not just gonna sleep here and live here for
Mm-hmm.
the rest of our life. We got to get back to the truck. Um, and so I've been very fortunate to have witnessed a lot of life changing moments in the field, and those are really the moments that keep me coming back to
Yeah,
guide.
I love it. I think that's awesome.
And I think that's why I'm going to do it forever. Like people ask
Mm-hmm.
me all the time, "How do you do it?" Like I could never be a guide. Cool. Well, that's you. Like for me, it's a different, right? And it's so much more than just like, oh, I got to try and get my client this big bowl. It's so much more. I have clients sending me poems from their experience because they were so touched just by the
Mm.
wild places. Oh, it fills up my cup. I love it.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. What made you? So you said you've kind of hunted most or all of your life.
Hmm.
At what point did you kind of think or know that like guiding or a career around hunting was what you wanted to pursue?
On that mule deer, well, so back it up. Growing up, I would always watch Primo's hunting videos with my dad. That was
Hmm.
like my dad and I bonded over hunting, fishing, and hunting videos. We would go to the Portland Expo a lot too. Like anything that involved hunting and fishing, like I soaked it up from my dad. That's where we connected. And I remember watching Primo's hunting with him when I was a kid and just being like, I want to do something like that someday. Like I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to like have my career be in the hunting industry somehow.
Hmm.
And then it was when I had my solo mule deer hunt in Colorado where I was successful and was able to pack that whole deer off the mountain in one load. That is where I was like, I want like that feeling of empowerment and confidence and connection and spirituality that came over me in that moment. I was like, I want to share this with other people. I have the skill set. I was finally confident in knowing like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Now that I've proven to myself, because I went into that hunt being like, I got to prove to myself I can do this. And I was like, oh, okay, I want to look into
Hmm.
this. And as soon as I put that out there, no joke, a couple weeks later, I got an opportunity to guide for the following year.
And did you go the typical route of like going to guiding school, or I think you have to do that, right, to get your guide license, or no?
No, I mean, every
No.
state's probably different.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have a lifetime of hunting under my belt, so I think that speaks for itself. And
Hmm.
each outfitter requires different requirements for sure.
Okay.
And I have heard of people going to guide school, but I never felt like I had to. I had harvested many animals in my lifetime before coming to guide. And it's not a glamour, crazy story. Like I was literally in the bar with my girlfriend and we were having a girls' night, and had a drink after dinner. And it was pretty funny because like the testosterone level in that bar was so annoying and we were so annoyed. We're like, stop
Uh-huh.
talking to us. We just want to sit here and have girls' time. Stop trying to buy us drinks. Like we were so annoyed.
Yeah.
And then my good friend Bill came up and him and my buddy Pat, they were playing pool and they're like, come play pool with us. And we're like, okay, whatever. And so we started talking and they're like, we're hunting guides, we're on break. And then my friend Amy was just like, oh my goodness, Drea shot this deer all by herself. She starts going on and I'm like, it's no big deal, whatever. And they're like, no, we want
Hmm.
to hear about it. Show us some pictures. So I did, and they're like, "Come work with us. We would love to have you. We need another guide up at camp." And I was like, "Really? It's like that easy?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll put in a good word with our boss." And I was up there the next year guiding. So
Nice.
yeah,
I think that's so cool how like you're at a bar like having a girls' night, right? Like you had no clue in that moment that that would
yeah,
possibly change the trajectory of your life. But
mm-hmm.
I also think, and going back to just like being vulnerable, like having that conversation with the guy at the bar, and like you could have very well been like, nope, like I'm not gonna play pool with you. I'm not gonna have
Yeah,
this conversation. But I go into every like interaction with a stranger of like, I could maybe even learn something from them, right? Like, say it's even someone at the grocery store and like they're
yeah,
telling me about the day that they had and like something that happened to them. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can take something away from that. So I think just being, and I'm not saying that every interaction you have can lead to something that's career changing or life changing, kind of like
right,
you experienced, but I think just being able to be open to just talking to anyone. And I
yeah,
think that, or I would like to think that's probably helped you in like your guiding career too, because you're hunting with people you've never met before. So I'm
mm-hmm.
sure sometimes like, and it's a two-way street, right? Like those people have to be open to like building a relationship too. But yeah, I'm curious if you've ever struggled with like anyone who's came in and just you couldn't even get more than a couple words out of them. Like they literally one track minded, like want to put a critter on the ground and like nothing else.
I did actually a couple years ago, and
Mhm.
it's not a very common thing. Like this was the
Oh, really?
one story, the one situation that really sticks out. This guy shows up. he's he's got a lot of money. He's paying for the private hunts, and he's instantly showing me pictures of this huge bull his son shot, and this huge bull he shot, both over 400-inch bulls. Well, they shot them on private ranches where they basically paid a fee to the rancher to go in. and the side by side, drive in and shoot the thing, and then the rancher comes in and pulls it out for them with their tractor and guts it for them, and they send it off to the processor. Super easy. You know, I've got this money. I'm going to talk to this rancher. So he comes out and expects this private hunt with me to be the same. Well, our
Mm-hmm.
private hunts that we offer at Brook Canyon Outfitters are not like that. We are paying for the access, where it's a private chunk of land that we are accessing public land through. Yeah, you might have a chance of shooting something on the private, but you're really hunting this national forest where those animals get pushed to, and you're not having to deal with a bunch of other hunters. And the extra cost of that is basically you're paying the trespass fee. So,
Mm-hmm.
your money isn't going towards us, it's going towards the fee, the lease that we have to pay. Anyway, so he shows up, shows me these pictures of these huge elk, and I'm like, all right, will you shoot a cow? I always talk to my clients, like, where are your expectations? What will you shoot? What are we looking for? And he's like, I want a big mule deer buck. I want a big bull. And I'm like, all right, we'll try. But this is this is Montana, where you have a lot of public land hunters, and deer. The deer hunts opened up in part of that area just a couple years before. So like a lot of those really big mature mule deer had been harvested. There were some good bucks running around, but nothing like what they used to see. I said, prepare yourself to go home empty handed if that's what you're looking for. And this is where another story about how the mountain humbles you so fast. Our first
Mm-hmm.
morning, we're walking in, and it's a steady incline, but we're going slow. We get to a spot, we wait for the sunrise, we glass it for a good hour, we sit, we wait. We don't see anything, so we go another maybe mile, 3/4 of a mile. He looks at me, we're sitting there for a little bit, and we're kind of watching this meadow. And he looks at me and he goes, "We're not going to the top, are we?" And I said, I mean, we'll probably sit here for a couple hours, but I would like to get up there for this afternoon. No, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going any further.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. We'll make a fire here and we'll chill. So we're sitting there at the fire, and he hasn't talked to me really much. Like, the night they check in, we usually have a happy half hour where, we have some appetizers and the bar's open, and we can sort of get to know our clients a little bit. And I always sit with my clients at dinner. I always sit with them at breakfast. And I sat with him at dinner that night before, and he was just like, nothing there, didn't really want to talk, wouldn't look at me when he was talking. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fun week.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're sitting there around the fire. He didn't want to go any further. And so I'm like, so tell me about your kids. Do they play sports or anything? And, oh, so is this where we sit down and pretend to get to know each other? Was his
What?
answer. And I said, no, I just, wanted to have conversation, get to know each other, but it's fine. We don't have to talk. And he went back to sleep, and he took his little nap. And I was like, okay, this is how this week's going to go. Just kind of like irritated, annoyed. But I was like, okay, here you are in this situation. Once again, like, no expectations as to how it's going to go. So give this
Mm-hmm.
guy the experience he wants. Just do a bunch of glassing and do your job. Try and find him an animal. Just do your job. And some mule deer poke out. We're sitting there on the fire. It's like, there's a buck. Can I shoot it? I should have looked first, but in my mind, I was like, oh, it's got to be a stud. Like, he's only taking a big mule deer. He's not going to shoot a little buck.
Yeah.
Shoots, and I look, and it's literally a little 3x3. And I go, huh, thought you wanted to shoot a big buck. I didn't tell him this, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the mountain humbled him so fast that he
He's
he went from I want this to I will take this.
uh
And so then the next day, I was like, hey, we can go hunt a cow, and you have pretty much 100% chance of shooting a cow on this private lease that we have, or we can go over to this other private area where, we're going to glass, and we're going to probably see some mature bulls, but we're going to have to definitely hike and put in some work to get to them. Which one would you like? And he goes, I'll take a cow. Perfect. Tagged him out in 2 days, and he was gone on morning 3, and I didn't have to deal with him anymore.
oh my goodness. That sucks for you, but I think that's so funny, and I'm surprised that that hasn't happened like more often. And I'm curious because you're a creative and you're working to create content and put stuff out there and like build a brand and all of that. And I really struggle, and like I love having a podcast. It's the best thing I've ever done with my life, but it's a passion project for me. Like I just really like having these cool conversations with people, and
Yeah,
if one person listens to it, cool. If 1,000 people listen to it, even better. But like I don't track those things, right? And
yeah,
I just like social media is especially, and I'm sure it's the same in other careers or industries, but like in the hunting industry, I think people see, I'm not going to say names, but like big name hunters, quote unquote.
yeah.
And they're like, oh, like every year, year after year, they're putting down like record bulls and record bucks. And like, I want to do, that's what I want to get into. It's not, I want to get into doing hard things. It's not,
Mhm.
I want to get into spending time in wild places. It's, I want to get into putting down really big animals that I can put on my wall. And I'm oftentimes willing to pay as much money as I possibly can to do that, which is like not real. Even with a like, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, even with a guide. And I learned this. I met a guy last year, or the year before last at the bow shop, and he's a guide and owns an outfitter here in Colorado. And like to him, success is that you saw something. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like people are coming and paying money, and like success doesn't mean that they're putting something down. And he goes, that's not how hunting works. Like
Yeah.
you're not always putting something down. And I was like, hmm. So even though people are still coming, like you said, maybe it's paying for access to private land or like trespassing and all that kind of stuff. Like I just, it was also new to me that I didn't know that that was how it worked. But I still
Mhm.
imagine that there are people that pay for a guide thinking that they're going to have 100% success rate. And that if that doesn't happen, I'm sure they're very frustrated afterwards.
Yeah, we tell them in our welcome speech, like, this isn't a hunting TV show. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
not how you're going to see it on the hunting TV shows or on the YouTube shows where, they're killing big bulls and big bucks. Like, the experience, like, we always tell them that they have already had a successful hunt just simply by getting the tag. Because a lot of people don't get a tag,
Yeah.
because if someone goes through an outfitter, they automatically get 2 preference points versus 1 preference point because they are going through an outfitter. And the whole cycle of that, of supporting the outfitters. Outfitters are bringing in a ton of business as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're with people who know what they're doing. It's sort of more of a controlled hunt environment, right? And so people who come through with an outfitter in Montana specifically, like they've already won that. They've already filled that tag. We tell them, like, you've already had a successful hunt just by getting here. So now that you're here, like, put down your expectations and enjoy
Mm-hmm.
it. And another thing that baffles me, and this came up when you were talking about how these people want to go out and pay big money and they want to shoot these big bulls and they don't want to put in any of the work. Well, I love hunting for the fact of like the work it takes, whether it means I'm in the gym, I'm on the mountain, and when I'm on the mountain, I'm hiking, I'm training, I'm glassing throughout the year. Like right now, I know where there's 1,000 elk. Like I can go, and that's because it's been a lifetime of learning, but it's because I make myself go out there and I love watching elk. And because I can learn so much about an elk in the wintertime and their habits and their habitat is not going to be the same, but it's going to be the same come springtime,
Mm-hmm.
come summertime, come fall time. They're going to follow the resources that they need: shelter, water, food. And there's so many people that get so wrapped up in like, I want to do these hunts, I want to do all this, but they don't want to put in the work to get there. And the work
Mm-hmm.
is what makes it so much fun. The preparation, the training, the studying maps, the trying to figure them out and observing, just being able to observe them, throughout the year and being like, okay, they're pretty much acting the same now as they're acting in the fall time. Their food source is way down low right now. And in the summertime, their food source is way up high. They're going to follow their resources, right? And I think that's such a fun part. Like I'm actually going on a wolf hunt this week. I'm really excited.
Cool.
First
Yeah.
ever wolf hunt. And I was like going through all my gear last night, just getting all fired up. Like, oh, what do I need? We're literally camping in the snow. We're gonna do a winter camping trip, and I've always wanted to do that. And I get cold super easy, but I want to do it because I want to experience that of like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it like? Can I push through it? Am I gonna lose? How many toes am I gonna lose? Frostbite? Like, I want
Yeah.
to have that uncomfortable experience of just glassing in the cold weather, looking for a wolf, and the chance of shooting a wolf is so, so slim. But
Mhm.
it's an excuse to get out there and continue to enjoy it and to continue to observe and learn throughout the year. And even though I'm wolf hunting, I'm still hunting and I'm still being present. I'm still having to track. I'm still having to glass, and that's going to relate to deer hunting. That's going to relate to elk hunting. The more you put yourself out there and the more you experience it, you're going to go into your season each year becoming more effective. Your efforts are going to go a
Mhm.
much further away versus being like, oh, I just wasted my entire weekend trying to figure out where the elk are and I never found them. Versus if I put in the work throughout the year and actually take a little bit of time throughout the week or the month or whatever it is to put in the time and learn and study and observe, you're going to come into season just so much more ready for that and not have tag soup year and year and year.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more about just like enjoying the process or the journey versus the destination. And I think for me, and I'm not going to say it's like a man versus woman thing, but I will feel like I've met more women who are okay with not filling their tags than men I've met who are okay with not filling their tags. But for me, and even just being so new, like anytime that I get out there, like if I'm seeing sign, if I'm finding fresh beds, like I've bow hunted in Colorado now for 2 seasons and I have not filled my elk tag. But like every day that I get out there, I learn something new. And yeah, like this year saw more sign and was the closest I've ever been, even though I still didn't fill my tag. But to me, like that is success. Like I got out there and I'm learning, I'm seeing things I've never seen before. I'm in areas I've never been and I'm still figuring things out. And like year after year, like that, especially as someone who's new. And I think too, what social media looks like is that you're gonna fill your tag every single time. And that's not real. That's not the case. Like I think what really helped me is I saw maybe it was last year honestly multiple different posts of like hunters who are either well known or maybe they just have a big following and they would say, let's see, there was one guy, he had got an antelope with his bow and it said it took him 7 years to harvest an antelope with his bow. And I was like, I'm so glad people are like saying that because that's really not what it looks like. That's not what a lot of people make it look like. And so, yeah, I think like just recognizing the hunting success and like just that you're learning every step of the way. But also, kind of like we've talked about throughout this conversation, is also like growing as an individual while I'm out there too. Like, yes, harvesting an animal is always going to be the goal. But recognizing that once that season is done, if I didn't fill that tag, that there's still so much to be learned from that. And that I can take that with me into following seasons.
Yeah, it's something as simple as going into a patch of timber and spoofing a herd. That's a bummer, and it sucks, right, in the moment. And you're like, oh, I should have done this different. I should have gone slower. Well, you just learned a huge lesson. Whether
Mhm.
that's how would I approach this timber differently next year, or how would I hunt this different next year? And
Mhm.
it sucks in the moment, but there's a learning opportunity from every experience that you have out there. And the more you can tap into, yes, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to grow versus beat yourself up, the
Mhm.
quicker you're going to improve as a hunter, but you're also going to like have that continued success within yourself, right? Of being like, I got this. Yep, I messed up, but that's part of the journey. And cool, I'm going to add this to my toolbox and I'm going to apply it
Mhm.
next year or on the next hunt.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm curious, and you've mentioned a handful of times just like the physical aspect of the hunt and preparing for the hunt and all of that. What do, I guess, a two-parted question. One, like you yourself, how do you physically prepare for just being able to be on the mountain, carrying a pack and all of that each year? And then it sounds like your friend from last year had kind of reached out and asked you maybe a little bit of things that he should be doing or he should be doing also. Is there anything that you kind of recommend to clients that if they're coming from Texas or somewhere where maybe they don't have access to that, like things that they should be doing too?
Yeah, absolutely. And for women, it's a little bit different. I've realized,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you're a woman and you're training, the training's definitely different. But if I were to
Mm-hmm.
give any advice to like a client, my advice is always to go for a ruck, like put some weight in your pack, but
Mm-hmm.
wear your gear. So wear your boots, wear your bino harness, bring your trekking poles, like dress as if you're going in to do a hunt because it's different if you're like if you're not all set up for that and you go do a hike. And I tell them, get off trail if you can. Okay, you live in Texas and you don't really have hills. We'll do the stair stepper, do box step up, something that's simulating that movement of moving up a mountain. And then another one is high intensity training where you try and, so let's just say you do 6 rounds of burpees for 20 seconds and you have 10 seconds to recover. The way I look at that is, and this has helped me huge on the mountain, is you do your 20 seconds work, and in that 10 seconds, you are trying to get your heart rate controlled as if those 20 seconds you were just running up a ridge after a screaming bull, and now you have
Mhm.
a 20-second or a 10-second window to make a shot. Well, if your heart rate's through the roof and you can't control that a little bit, you're probably not going to make a great shot. And so that training works so great, and it goes right to the mountain experience. It's like go 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 go. Oh, gotta present a shot. So rucking with all the gear is a huge one, and then getting that sort of training in of your body is getting trained, but also like your mind's being trained of like, okay, this repetitive action of getting that heart rate up, calming myself down, getting the heart rate up, calming myself down. Even sitting in a tree stand, I experienced it in South Dakota. Like, shot my very first deer with my bow, and this doe comes running in, and I'm just like freaking out. And I'm like trying to draw on her, and I could barely
Uh-huh.
draw. And I'm like, it's just a doe, Drea. Why are you getting so excited? Well, that's why we do it, right? It's because it gets us fired
For
up.
sure, yeah.
But it's like I didn't have a lot of training from or experience at all hunting from tree stands, and so that was a
Mm.
big one for me. Of like, this is a whole new different avenue. This isn't big game hunting on the mountain. This is like, you got to make sure your harness and everything is set up right. Like, do you have shooting lanes? And you see a doe coming, you
Mm.
still have to keep that heart rate calm. So that was a big learning curve for me too. Of like, okay, I've got to apply what I know for big game, but kind of apply it, you know, for whitetail deer out of a tree.
Yeah, I always say like I've had conversations with people. I've got quite a few friends out east who do more tree stand hunting than anything else for whitetail, and that's how mostly how you have to hunt out there, which is like you
Yeah.
said, a totally different style of hunting, and I think can appear as if maybe it's not as important to be as physically fit or anything like that, but I always like to say, like there was kind of a presentation I gave a while back, and I'm like, just because you're sitting a tree stand doesn't really mean that you should train that much differently than someone who's climbing a mountain. Because to your point, I mean, if you're someone who enjoys it that much, where your heart rate does go up when a big buck comes in, or even like I'm the same, a doe comes in and my heart is just going crazy. But like being your physical fitness can help you control that heart rate in those moments, or just even putting yourself in, whether it's physical activity or what that may look like, but putting yourself in situations where, yeah, your heart rate's going to go up really quickly because of a critter that walked in or because of something physical that you just did. Like maybe you walked a mile into your tree stand, and as soon as you get all set up and your heart rate's up, that's when that big buck comes in. Like we're gonna have to slow our heart rate, especially if you're shooting with a bow. Because I don't know about you, but if
Yeah.
my heart rate is up and I'm shooting with a bow, it makes it 10 times harder to even
So much
shoot like a
harder.
target, right? Like much less to
Mm-hmm.
shoot at a critter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just like having people put themselves in situations where your heart rate is up, and I'm just like, I always just say whatever you like to do that is what
Yeah.
I recommend, because I don't ever like telling people to do things that maybe they don't like to do. But yeah, I think so many people underestimate that like a tree stand hunt still requires a level of physical fitness to be able to be successful.
Yeah.
Um, Depending on how you like to do it. Now, if you're a guy who's been doing it 40 years and you've got your one spot you go to every single time, and you know you're getting something every single time, and you just do it for the meat and you don't get the thrill of it, like maybe the conversation changes a little bit. But I
Yeah.
definitely think there's a degree of like physical activity and fitness that's important for all styles of hunting, no matter what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I was just chatting with my client on the phone the other day, and I said, the more you dive into these sucky workouts you're doing, the the less intimidating the mountain's going to become, and the
Mm-hmm.
less challenges you're going to have to face on the mountains. There's always going to be challenges. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I view hunting so much as life. Okay, so you go on a stalk. Let's say you go on a stalk, you see this mule deer, he's bedded down. All right, you've got to go through all of these little canyons and ravines, and you've got to hide, and you've got to be very diligent about getting to him and getting to that opportunity. So this could relate
Mm-hmm.
to your career or goals or whatever it might be. You have to put in all this work, and it takes time and effort, and you get there and you stand up and you skyline and you blow the stock. Well, you do all this work and you realize after a certain amount of years, this isn't the career path I want. or you're in a relationship for so long and you do all this work and you realize this relationship's not serving me. The
Mm-hmm.
mountain and hunting is a direct correlation to like how we can live our life, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
connect those two and realizing on the mountain, just because you fail a stock or you call in a bull and he wins you, it's a direct correlation to like how you could view your life as well. And I feel like when you have a connection with both of those, then it's like, okay, all right, this is fine. Like, this is life. We're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going through it and having that understanding. And like I said, I was telling my client the other day, like, you got to just keep pushing, and it's going to be hard. But the more you push and you face those mental challenges in the gym, the more rewarding and easier it's going to be on the mountain for you.
Yeah, someone said recently, and I wish I could remember who it was. It was like on the mountain as in life. And like just that as in life part is kind of what like really stood out to me because exactly what you just said. There's so much that we can take away from hunting, from being on the mountain that applies to real life. And kind of like I think you're alluding to this too with your client and the physical training, as it builds that level of mental resilience too, right? If you keep doing workouts that are not easy to you, that are challenging to you. Maybe you wake up and you're like, I'm just not feeling it today, but I do it anyways. Like,
Mm-hmm.
then that's kind of backwards, like, as in life on the mountain. Like, by the time you get on the mountain, these things that you've pursued day in and day out are going to make your time on the mountain that much easier, too.
Exactly. And more enjoyable. When it's easier,
For,
it's enjoyable. And there's
yeah.
always going to be struggle to it, with each hunt, but it's going to make it more enjoyable. And that's a whole nother thing is like, and we can go down a rabbit hole of all these topics, but like once you have a negative mindset on the mountain, it could be really hard to pull out of that and to push out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people can't, and it forces them to quit. Um, I actually wrote a blog about this on my last week's blog. My friend Jess came out and we were able to get her a bull elk and me a mule deer
Mm-hmm.
buck in 3 days' time. And that hunt was one of the hardest hunts for me, not the physical aspect, but the mental aspect. Like everything in my mind was telling me, like, you just stop, like, go home, take a nap, give yourself a break. This sucks. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
hormonal things going on, But I was just like, no, I'm not letting the mountain define me. Like, I'm not gonna let the
Yeah.
mountain win. Like, this is something I see with my clients all the time. I'm not going to be one of my clients. I'm not going to give into it. And pushing through that, I was able to harvest the deer. It was awesome. And to have that feeling of like, I can face what comes my way. Like, I am stronger than my
Mm-hmm.
doubts. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we are coming up on just about an hour here, Dre. I end, like I said earlier, I end all my episodes asking my guests, what does wild strength mean to you? So, what comes to mind when you think of wild strength, or what does that phrase mean to you when you think about it?
When I think about wild strength, I think about that like inner strength I've had ever since I was a little girl. And what I had gone through, and even though I didn't tell anyone for years and I would handled everything on my own, like I've always had that strength inside me to just keep pushing through the next day, to keep chasing those goals, to keep chasing those dreams, and to live a life that's like fulfilling for me and for not other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that wild strength definitely lives within those wild places. That's where it's nurtured, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I feel it most.
Yeah, I love that. If people want to reach out, if they have questions, if they want to read your book, where can they find you?
They can find me. I have a couple different platforms. My creative platform is What's Your Wild Creative, which I'm really trying to promote. I offer my big game consulting program and my photography and my writing and uh, photo stuff through there. But my personal page is what's underscore your underscore wild. But both pages are linked up together. If you go to either one, you'll be able to access my book. You'll be able to access photography and guiding stories, blogs, all the things.